The house was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that presses against your chest until it hurts. The faint ticking of the clock was the only sound, each second heavier than the last. The screen of my phone glowed in the dark, my thumb hovering above the block button. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of everything that had led to this moment. The small bag on my bed was half zipped. A few clothes, a toothbrush, my worn-out journal, nothing more. I wasn't planning to take much. I didn't need much. All I wanted was distance. As I looked around the room, every little thing felt like a memory that no longer belonged to me. The framed photo of a family smiling for a camera, the childhood trophies collecting dust, the fairy lights that never quite worked. All of it suddenly meaningless. My chest tightened as the phone buzzed again. Mom's name flashed on the screen. I turned it face down. I didn't want to hear another excuse, another apology that meant nothing. I sat at the edge of my bed staring at the floor, listening to the hum of the air conditioner. It was 2:03 a.m. Outside, the world was asleep, but inside me, everything was awake. Every wound, every word, every moment of being invisible. I slipped on my jacket, zipped up the bag, and stood for a long time, looking at the door. There's a strange peace that comes when you realize you're done trying. I unlocked my phone one last time. My thumb pressed block. One contact after another, Mom, Dad, my sister. Each tap felt like closing a chapter. For a second, I hesitated at the doorway. The house felt smaller than ever, like it was holding its breath, waiting to see if I'd actually go through with it. Then I opened the door. The night air hit my face, cold, still, heavy with freedom. The streetlights stretched across the empty road, and the sound of my footsteps echoed like a heartbeat. No destination. No plan, just escape. I didn't cry, not then. I'd cried enough already. But as I reached the end of the street and looked back one last time, I felt something inside me quietly break. And in that break, something else began to form. A new version of me? One that wouldn't beg to be seen anymore. And as the first breeze of dawn touched my face, I whispered to myself, it all started with one red bow and a smile that wasn't mine. People used to say we were the perfect family. From the outside, I suppose we looked like one. Smiling faces in photographs, matching clothes on holidays, birthday parties filled with laughter and glittering lights. But behind those perfectly captured moments was a story no one saw. My sister Emily was the light of the house. The golden child. The one everyone adored without question. She had this effortless charm, the kind of girl who could spill juice on the carpet and still get a hug for being cute. And me? I learned early on that being the quiet one was easier. If I stayed silent, I wouldn't disappoint anyone. Dad used to joke that Emily was the face of the family, the one everyone noticed. When relatives came over, he'd pull her forward, brag about her grades, her smile, her friends. And then, just as quickly, he'd pat my shoulder and say, "And this is our calm one." That was my role, the calm one, the invisible one. Mom always said she loved us equally, but her actions told another story. When Emily forgot to clean her room, Mom would sigh and do it for her. When I did the same, it became a lecture about responsibility and respect. At dinner, Emily's stories were met with laughter. Mine were met with distracted nods, eyes already on their phones. I tried to brush it off for years. I told myself, it's fine. Every family has favorites. But it wasn't just favoritism, it was a pattern. A quiet reminder that my worth had limits. I remember one winter morning, we were kids, Mom made hot chocolate. She handed Emily a big red mug topped with whipped cream and marshmallows. Mine came in a chipped cup with barely any sugar. Emily giggled, showing off her drink, and Mom smiled at her, saying, "You deserve it, sweetheart." I laughed too, pretending it didn't sting. But that tiny moment stayed with me for years. Because sometimes the smallest things reveal the biggest truths. In school, Emily was the social butterfly. She was invited to every party, every event. If I tried to talk about something I achieved, a good grade, a drawing contest, the excitement never matched. "That's nice," Mom would say, half listening, scrolling through her phone. But when Emily got a compliment from her teacher, it became a family celebration. I told myself not to compare. That love wasn't a competition. But no matter how much I convinced myself, the feeling of being unseen kept growing. Like a shadow that followed me everywhere. Every photo we took as a family told the same story. Emily in the center, smiling bright, my parents on either side, and me slightly to the edge, trying to fit in the frame. It wasn't just physical placement. It was emotional, too. Dad once said, "You should learn from your sister. She's going places." That night, I stayed up wondering where I was going. Because no matter how hard I tried, I always seemed to end up in the same place, behind her. But I never stopped trying to be loyal. I helped Emily with her projects, even when she forgot to thank me. I listened when she cried about friends or breakups. When she got her first internship, I stayed up late helping her prepare for interviews. And when she got the job she celebrated with Mom and Dad, I watched from my room. Still, I told myself, it's fine. This is what love looks like, giving without expecting anything back. But over time, small things began to feel heavier. The missed birthdays, the forgotten congratulations, the way they only noticed me when they needed help. I became a background character in my own family story, quiet, dependable, replaceable. And yet, I didn't want to hate them. I wanted to believe that deep down they cared, that maybe they just didn't know how to show it. I clung to that hope like a lifeline, telling myself one day, things would change. But deep down, a quiet truth had already started to whisper inside me. It spoke in the silence after laughter, in the coldness of unspoken words. And though I tried to ignore it, I could feel it growing. The awareness that love in my family wasn't built on fairness. It was built on convenience. Years passed, and that illusion of perfect began to crack. Whenever people complimented us, "You're so lucky to have such a loving family," I'd smile politely, wondering what they'd say if they saw what happened when the cameras turned off. Because love, real love, doesn't choose favorites. It doesn't hand one child a gift and another a lesson. But in our house, fairness was a myth I grew up believing until it broke me. And on the night I finally saw the truth, the night of that shiny red bow, I realized something I wish I hadn't. I thought love was equal in a family. I was wrong. The day started like any other. Except it wasn't. The house buzzed with excitement from the moment I woke up. Laughter spilled from the kitchen, music played softly in the background, and the faint scent of vanilla frosting drifted through the air. It was Emily's 21st birthday, the big one, as Mom called it. The day she said would change everything for our family. I walked downstairs, half smiling, trying to blend into the joy around me. Balloons floated across the ceiling, pink and silver. The dining table shimmered with decorations, cupcakes, candles, tiny ribbons. Mom moved around the room with her phone, recording every detail. Dad was outside setting up the camera tripod, adjusting angles like this was some movie premiere. And in a way, it was just not mine. Emily twirled in the living room, wearing a dress that sparkled when the light hit it. Everyone complimented her. "You look like a star. This is your day." I stood by the wall, smiling softly, clapping when they looked my way. It wasn't jealousy, not really. It was something quieter, a feeling that I didn't belong in the celebration I was part of. Mom handed me a tray of snacks and said, "Honey, can you take this outside? Guests will be here soon." Her voice was sweet but not warm. Like I was staff, not family. I nodded because saying no never changed anything. By the time the guests arrived, the backyard looked like a dream. Fairy lights hung from the trees, music floated through the evening air, and the laughter grew louder as the sun went down. Everyone had a drink in hand. Everyone except me. Then came the moment. The one they'd all been waiting for. Dad called everyone to gather around. Mom stood beside him, her smile so wide it almost looked rehearsed. Emily giggled nervously, pretending not to know what was coming, though she clearly did. Then, with a little dramatic pause, Dad said, "Emily, we've watched you grow into the most amazing daughter any parents could ask for. And tonight, we want to give you something special, something that represents how proud we are." He turned toward the driveway. And there it was. A brand new BMW, midnight blue. A giant red bow wrapped around the hood, glistening under the string lights. Gasps filled the air. Emily covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. Mom clapped, screaming, "Surprise!" The guests cheered. Cameras flashed. And me? I stood frozen. Someone handed me my phone, asking me to record the moment. So I did, smiling behind the lens, pretending I was happy to capture my own erasure. I watched Emily hug our parents, crying and laughing, thanking them over and over. She looked beautiful, radiant, complete. And for a moment, I wanted to feel that too, even just a fraction of it. But all I felt was a silence growing inside me. Then Mom turned to me, eyes bright, holding something small. "And we didn't forget you either," she said cheerfully. She handed me a tiny box wrapped in recycled paper. Everyone watched as I unwrapped it. Inside was a white ceramic mug, plain, with the words "Be Grateful" printed in faded gold. I laughed quietly because what else could I do? People around smiled awkwardly. Someone even said, "That's cute," to fill the silence. And for the next few minutes, everyone acted like nothing strange had happened. But I could feel it. That invisible wall between us, built brick by brick over years, now stood taller than ever. Emily didn't mean to hurt me. She was too busy enjoying her moment. And my parents? They didn't even notice the difference between her keys and my mug. I walked inside while everyone laughed outside by the car. In the kitchen, I stared at the mug under the warm yellow light. The gold letters glowed faintly, "Be grateful," as if the universe was mocking me. My throat tightened. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. I wanted to scream, but the words got stuck somewhere deep. So I just stood there, silent, watching my reflection bend in the curved surface of that mug. Later that night, when the guests had left and the house grew quiet again, I heard Emily's laughter echo from her room. Mom and Dad were still awake, talking about how proud they were. Their voices carried through the walls, soft and content. And me? I sat by my window, holding the mug in both hands, feeling the cool ceramic press against my palms. The night outside was beautiful, stars scattered across the sky, a faint hum of crickets in the distance. But inside, it felt like something sacred had just broken. It wasn't about the car. It was about what the car meant. Recognition, love, worth. All the things I thought I had to earn, but maybe never could. For years, I'd told myself to be patient, that one day they'd see me. But that night, staring at that mug, I realized they never would. Not because I wasn't enough, but because they never looked. That night, I didn't sleep. Something inside me cracked open. After that birthday, I began seeing my life differently. Not as a daughter living in a family, but as a quiet audience member in a show I didn't belong to. But truthfully, the signs had been there for years. I just didn't want to see them. When I graduated high school, it should have been one of those proud moments. Caps in the air, photos, hugs, maybe dinner together. Emily couldn't make it because she had a social event. Mom and Dad came late, missing my name being called on stage. I remember standing outside afterward, clutching my diploma, pretending it didn't matter. When they finally arrived, Mom said, "You should have told us the ceremony was that quick." Dad nodded, glancing at his watch. We took one picture in the parking lot, half-hearted smiles, headlights behind us. That was my big day. No dinner, no celebration. Just a quiet ride home while they talked about Emily's upcoming internship. I learned to hide disappointment well. Over time, it became a habit. The art of pretending I wasn't hurt. College came, and with it more of the same. I studied hard, worked part-time jobs, and paid for my own textbooks. Meanwhile, Emily called home to say she wanted to take a break to travel. And suddenly, Mom was online searching for flight deals and self-discovery retreats. She got a new passport. I got another reminder that I was on my own. But nothing stung quite like the day I brought home my first achievement award. Best Marketing Project. I'd stayed up for nights, pouring everything I had into it. I walked into the living room, holding the framed certificate, my heart racing with excitement. Mom and Dad were watching a talk show about some influencer's new business. I held the frame up, smiling, saying, I won first place. Dad looked up for a second and said, "That's nice," then turned back to the TV. That's all I got. 2 words. Later that night, I placed the award on my shelf, right next to an old photo of Emily in her prom dress. They'd framed hers. Mine gathered dust. The more I achieved, the quieter their praise became. And the quieter their praise, the louder my silence grew. It wasn't just about achievements, though. It was about love, or the version of love they understood. My parents believed that showing love meant showing off. Family dinners weren't about connection. They were performances. They'd invite people over, speak in rehearsed voices, laugh at stories they'd already told a dozen times. When guests praised Emily, their smiles would widen. When someone asked about me, they'd say, "Oh, she's the quiet one." Quiet. That word followed me everywhere. It became who I was, not because I lacked a voice, but because no one wanted to hear it. Our family's obsession with appearances ran deeper than I realized. Every holiday was a photo shoot. Every gathering, a competition. Emily always had the newest outfit, the brightest smile, the perfect caption ready for social media. Mom would say, "Stand beside your sister, dear. She's more photogenic, but you balance the frame." I smiled on cue every time, because I thought being cooperative was the same as being loved. There were smaller moments too, hundreds of them, all woven together into one long ache. Like the time I got sick during finals week, and Dad told me not to exaggerate because Emily had an audition that needed peace and quiet. Or the time I saved up to buy Mom a birthday gift, a silver bracelet, and she asked if I'd kept the receipt just in case. But when Emily handed her a store-bought candle, Mom cried and said, "You always know what I love." It was like I existed only in the background of their world, seen, but never noticed. I became the steady one, the fixer, the listener. When things went wrong, they came to me for advice. When things went right, they forgot I was there. And through it all, I kept giving. Giving time, patience, forgiveness, all in hopes of being recognized as part of the family I kept trying to belong to. But love, I learned, doesn't bloom in silence. It withers there. I started spending more time outside. Late-night walks, quiet cafes, library corners. Places where no one knew who I was, and no one expected anything from me. Sometimes I'd scroll through old photos, trying to find a memory where I looked genuinely happy. There weren't many. Most of them showed me smiling beside Emily, like a shadow pretending to shine. The hardest part wasn't being ignored. It was knowing they didn't even realize they were doing it. In their minds, they were good parents, hardworking, supportive, loving. They had no idea their version of love left scars you couldn't see. Years of this turned me into someone else. Not angry, not bitter, just detached. I learned to expect nothing, so disappointment wouldn't hurt as much. I stopped waiting for phone calls or questions that never came. And when they did reach out, it was usually to ask for help, fix a document, handle a bill, calm a situation. Never, "How are you doing?" Never, "We're proud of you." Slowly, my silence became my protection. It was easier to stay invisible than to keep chasing affection that always slipped away. People say family is everything. But what if your family never really sees you? What if they only see the version that's convenient? The helper, the listener, the one who won't fight back. For years, I convinced myself that if I worked harder, they'd notice. If I achieved more, they'd care. If I loved them enough, they'd finally see me. But they didn't. And one day, I stopped trying. Because love that has to be earned isn't love. It's debt. And as I looked back on all those unseen years, the birthdays forgotten, the dinners where I sat in silence, the gifts that never came, I realized the truth I'd been avoiding all along. I started realizing they never saw me, only what I could give. The night after Emily's birthday felt heavier than any I can remember. The house was still filled with the scent of roses, leftover cake, and that new car leather smell that clung to the air like arrogance. She'd parked her shiny BMW right in front of the house, the red bow still tied across the hood, catching the porch light. Every time I looked through the window, it felt like the universe was mocking me. that bow, that smile, that moment. Dinner was quiet at first. Emily was glowing, scrolling through the photos her friends had taken. Mom hovered nearby, refilling her glass, saying things like, "You look just like your aunt when she got her first luxury car." Dad laughed, proud, his voice echoing through the dining room. I sat across from them, pushing food around my plate, pretending to listen. Inside, something was twisting, sharp, cold, and tired. Then Emily turned to me and said, "You didn't say anything about the car. Don't you like it?" Her tone wasn't curious. It was teasing, sweet on the surface, venom underneath. I smiled weakly. "It's nice. You deserve it." My voice didn't even sound like mine. Mom looked up, eyebrows raised. "You could at least be happy for your sister, sweetheart. It's not a competition." I felt my chest tighten. Not a competition? It had always been a competition. I just never signed up for it. I tried to swallow the lump in my throat and said quietly, "I am happy for her. I just wish sometimes you'd notice me too." The table went silent. For a second, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd finally hear me. But then Dad sighed, setting his fork down. "There it is again, that tone. You always twist things into drama. We do notice you. You just don't appreciate what we do." Mom nodded, her voice softer but sharper. "You've always been sensitive, darling. You should learn to be more grateful. Emily just happens to have different needs." Grateful, that word burned more than any insult. Grateful for what? For being the emotional punching bag that made their favorite daughter shine brighter. For being told to be the bigger person every time they cut me down? I sat there staring at my plate, realizing this conversation wasn't new. It had happened in different forms, different rooms, countless times before. Only this time, something inside me finally cracked. Emily laughed lightly, twirling her hair. "Don't take it personally. You know Mom and Dad just want me to be safe. A BMW's not about favoritism, it's about protection." She said it like I was too fragile to understand logic. Like the pain sitting in my chest was a misunderstanding I'd imagined. I looked at her, at all of them. And in that moment, I felt completely invisible. They were speaking to each other, over me, around me. No one was really seeing me. I pushed my chair back, the sound scraping through the silence. Mom looked startled. "Where are you going?" I wanted to say something cruel, something final. But I didn't, because the truth was, I wasn't angry anymore. I was empty. I stood up slowly and said, "I'm not hungry." Then I walked upstairs before anyone could stop me. In my room, I sat on the floor beside my half-packed laundry bag. The sound of laughter drifted up from downstairs, carefree, echoing, hollow. I thought about every year I'd spent trying to earn their love, and how every effort only proved how little I mattered. I questioned myself over and over. Was I overreacting? Was I selfish for wanting to be loved the same? Was I jealous? The voice in my head, the one they'd built over the years, whispered, "Maybe you're the problem." But then another voice rose beneath it, quiet but steady. "No, you're just done being their afterthought." For the first time, I didn't cry. I just sat there, breathing in the stillness, feeling something unfamiliar. Peace. It wasn't the loud, triumphant kind. It was the quiet, dangerous calm that comes when you've finally accepted the truth. They were never going to change. And I couldn't keep breaking myself to fit into their idea of love. I looked at my reflection in the window, tired eyes, trembling hands, and whispered to myself, if I stay, I'd lose myself completely. And that's when I knew. Something had to end that night, either the illusion of family or me. The clock on my wall glowed faintly, 2 a.m., that strange in-between hour where the world feels half asleep, half awake. And you're caught somewhere in the middle. The laughter from downstairs had faded hours ago. The only sounds left were the soft hum of the refrigerator, the faint buzz of a streetlight outside, and my own heartbeat, steady but heavy. My bag sat by the door, zipped this time. No hesitation. No turning back. I ran my fingers over the old fabric, frayed, a little torn. It had been with me since college. Somehow it felt like the only thing that truly knew me. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone. The screen was bright, the chat window open. Mom's name. Dad's. Drafted messages I'd written, deleted, rewritten again. None of them felt right. None of them felt enough. How do you say goodbye to people who never noticed you were breaking? How do you explain the kind of pain that has no language? The pain of being unseen. The moonlight spilled through the window, cutting a pale line across the floor. I followed it with my eyes. It looked like a path pointing toward the door. I picked up a pen and a small piece of paper. For a long time, I just stared at it. My hand hovered, shaking slightly. At first, I wanted to write everything. All the years of silence, all the times I smiled through hurt, every invisible wound. But when the ink finally touched the paper, only one sentence came out. Don't worry, I'll be okay. No blame. No explanation. Just a quiet truth. I folded the note and left it on my pillow, the same pillow that had soaked up so many tears they never saw. As I stood at the doorway, I took one last look around. The faint glow of fairy lights. The family photo on the shelf. 4 smiling faces that looked happy, frozen in time. The framed certificate from school, half hidden behind a stack of my sister's awards. It all looked the same, and yet, it didn't feel like mine anymore. I turned the doorknob slowly, careful not to make a sound. The hinges creaked just a little, almost like the house was whispering goodbye. Outside, the air was cold and still. The driveway shimmered faintly under the moonlight. There it was, the BMW. Perfect, spotless, a symbol of everything I wasn't. The red bow hung loosely now, fluttering in the breeze like it was tired too. I walked past it, my footsteps soft against the pavement. No tears this time, just silence. Halfway down the street, I turned back. The house stood there, dark, calm, peaceful. You'd never guess that someone just left for good. I pulled out my phone one last time. My thumb hovered over my family group chat. Then, one by one, block, Mom, Dad, Emily. The screen went black, and in that silence, something inside me finally loosened. The wind brushed my face, carrying the faint scent of jasmine from the neighbor's garden. It felt like the world was waiting, quietly, for me to take the next step. I adjusted my bag on my shoulder and whispered into the night. That's it. And as I started walking, a strange calm settled over me, heavy yet freeing. The pain didn't vanish, but it didn't control me anymore. I wasn't running away. I was finally walking toward myself. That night, I didn't just leave home. I left who they wanted me to be. The first morning after I left felt unreal. The sun came up like it always did, but everything looked sharper, colder, quieter. The world outside felt too big, and I felt too small. I had no plan, just a few $100s in my account, a half-packed bag, and a heart that didn't know what to feel. For the first time in my life, there was no one waiting for me downstairs, no one asking where I was going, no one expecting anything from me. Freedom felt strange, like standing on a cliff, thrilling and terrifying all at once. The first few nights, I stayed at a small guest house near the edge of town. The walls were thin, the lights flickered, and the bed creaked every time I moved. But it was quiet, beautifully quiet. That silence, the same kind that once suffocated me at home, now felt like air I could finally breathe. Still, loneliness was its own kind of storm. There were moments when I almost called them, moments when the weight of the world pressed too hard, and I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd changed overnight. But every time I reached for my phone, I remembered that night. The laughter, the red bow, the way my pain had been brushed aside like it didn't matter. And I'd put the phone back down. Days turned into weeks. I found a part-time job at a small bookstore downtown, the kind that smelled like dust, coffee, and old stories. The owner, a quiet woman in her 50s, never asked questions. She just handed me a mug of tea on my first day and said, "You look like someone who's been holding their breath for too long." She was right. And somehow, shelving books and greeting strangers became therapy. I learned how to survive, how to budget, how to cook cheap meals, how to walk home at night without feeling afraid. I learned how to sit with silence and not hate it. I learned that peace doesn't always come with comfort. Sometimes it comes wrapped in loneliness, testing if you're strong enough to stay. Every now and then, I'd see families walk past the shop window, laughing, talking, existing together. And yes, it hurt. But that hurt began to change. It wasn't bitterness anymore, it was acceptance. I started realizing that maybe the love I had been begging for wasn't something they could ever give. Maybe it was something I had to build for myself. So I did, slowly, quietly, piece by piece. Some nights I'd walk by the river, watching the reflection of the city lights ripple on the water. The world looked endless, and for once so did my possibilities. There were no more red bows, no more forced smiles, just me, learning who I really was beneath all the pretending. And though there were still moments when the loneliness felt unbearable, there was something beautiful hidden beneath it. Peace. A kind of peace that didn't need permission to exist. I wasn't who I used to be. I wasn't who they said I was. I was someone new, someone free. And as I looked at the dark sky one night, a thought came to me, soft but certain. Sometimes losing a family is the only way to find yourself. Time has a strange way of healing, not suddenly, but slowly, like light seeping into a room that was dark for too long. Years passed. Seasons changed. And so did I. The bookstore became my second home for a while. From there, I built something bigger, a small online business at first, helping local writers publish their work. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Every late night, every struggle, every tiny win added up. I learned that success doesn't always come from grand beginnings. Sometimes it's born quietly in the corners of forgotten dreams. Eventually, I moved into a little apartment downtown. One bedroom, a balcony, and sunlight that poured in every morning. I filled it with plants, music, and peace. No trophies. No expensive gifts. Just warmth, the kind I built for myself. The person staring back at me in the mirror these days doesn't flinch anymore. No more shrinking. No more apologizing for existing. I started traveling for work, meeting people who saw me, not as a shadow in someone else's story, but as someone with purpose. And with each step, I realized that leaving that house wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of it. But the past, it never stays quiet forever. It started with a message request on social media. Mom's name. A simple, "We miss you. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a long time. Part of me wanted to reply. Another part, the wiser part, knew better. Then came another message, this time from an aunt. "Your sister isn't doing well. Things have changed. She could use your help." I didn't reply to that one either, because I remembered the way their words had once cut through me like glass. And I knew, forgiveness doesn't always mean returning. I heard through distant relatives that Emily's perfect life wasn't so perfect anymore. Her shiny BMW had been sold. The smiles had faded. And for the first time, she was learning what it meant to stand on her own. I didn't feel joy in that. Just a quiet understanding. Life has its own way of teaching lessons, lessons that no one escapes. Sometimes I'd look at the sky at night, thinking about how far I'd come, from the lonely guest house room to this life I built from nothing. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about peace. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need to prove my worth. Because now I knew it. And as I sipped my morning coffee one quiet Sunday, sunlight spilling across my desk, I caught myself smiling. Not for anyone else, but for me. Funny how life balances things, quietly, without applause. It happened on a Sunday, the kind of day that begins soft, ordinary, and ends up changing something inside you. I wasn't expecting it. I had gone to the hospital to visit a friend from work, a small bouquet of lilies in my hand. The corridors smelled of antiseptic and quiet heartbreak. And then, I saw them, my parents. Mom was sitting in the waiting area, her posture smaller than I remembered. The confident woman who once commanded every room now looked fragile, almost lost. Dad was beside her, reading something on his phone, his glasses sliding down his nose. For a moment, my heart forgot how to beat. They hadn't seen me yet. I could have walked away, slipped out the other door, vanished like I'd practiced all these years. But something made me stay. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was closure. Maybe it was just time. When Mom finally looked up, her eyes widened, and the lilies nearly slipped from my hand. She stood, hesitating for a moment before whispering, "It's really you." Her voice trembled. Dad looked up too, and for the first time I saw regret in his eyes. Not pride, not frustration, just quiet regret. We stood there, strangers bound by history. They walked closer, slowly, like they were afraid I'd disappear if they moved too fast. Mom's eyes searched my face, tracing the years she'd missed. "You look different," she said softly. I smiled faintly. "I am." There was a long pause, the kind that fills a room with everything unsaid. Dad cleared his throat. "We've tried reaching you. We just wanted to know if you're okay." His voice cracked slightly. I nodded. "I am. Better than I've ever been." Mom's lip trembled. "We made mistakes. We didn't realize how much we hurt you until—" Her voice broke. "Until you were gone." It should have felt satisfying hearing that. It didn't. It just felt sad. Then came Emily. She turned the corner holding a small clutch, looking almost the same, except older, tired, and unsure. For a second our eyes met and time folded in on itself. "Hey," she said quietly. It wasn't a proud hey. It was fragile, the kind that hides apology inside it. I nodded back. "Hey!" She looked away first. The silence that followed was heavy but not hostile. It was the silence of people standing on opposite shores, knowing the water between them can't be crossed anymore. Mom reached for my hand. For a second I almost let her hold it, but then I didn't. Instead I said, "I'm not angry anymore. I just don't belong there." Her eyes filled with tears. "We just want another chance." I shook my head gently. "You already had all of them." Dad looked down. Emily wiped a tear. And for a moment I felt something lift off me. Years of weight, of ache, of trying. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need apologies. I just needed to stand there, strong, calm, and free. So I did. I placed the lilies on the nearby table, gave them one last look, and said quietly, "Take care of each other." Then I turned, walked toward the exit, and didn't look back. As the automatic doors slid open, sunlight hit my face, warm, golden, forgiving. And in that light, I realized something simple yet profound. I forgave them, but I didn't go back. The years that followed weren't loud or dramatic. They were quiet, peaceful. For the first time in my life, silence didn't mean loneliness. It meant freedom. I learned that sometimes walking away isn't about anger or revenge. It's about choosing peace over pain, choosing yourself when no one else does. In that silence, I heard everything I'd been missing. My own voice. The voice that had always been drowned out by comparisons, expectations, and apologies that never came. I stopped waiting for them to see my worth, and started living like I already had it. It wasn't easy. There were nights when I almost called, almost went back, almost believed I had overreacted. But then I'd remember that moment at 2 a.m., the weight of my decision, the calm that followed, and I'd realize I made the right choice. Love shouldn't hurt. Family shouldn't be conditional. And silence. Silence isn't emptiness. It's space to heal, to grow, to rebuild what they broke. Now, when I think about that house, the red bow, the laughter, I don't feel bitterness anymore. Just distance. A quiet kind of closure, because sometimes the loudest love is the one you give yourself. And if you've ever been the forgotten one, remember this. Your story doesn't end in their shadow. It begins the moment you step out of it.